Good morning, Inspired Illuminators. It is me, Engel, your highest possibility state subconscious coach. And within my reality, I've been kind of hearing, not necessarily from friends, not from myself, but the theme from maybe things I listen to. Maybe it is the algorithm of YouTube or whatever that kind of shifts similar content toward me. But it is something, again, I have experienced many times throughout my lifetime. At least the second statement that I'm about to say, not necessarily the first. But the first statement I've heard twice now in two totally different podcasts or whatever that I've heard. And, each of those people had their own way of handling these statements. And I decided to share my viewpoint about these two statements. Again, not to convince anyone to think the way Jenny does. Can't necessarily do that. But to just say that's interesting and or maybe open someone's heart or mind to think it could be a possibility or another explanation. And then also to provide a little background just so you know where I'm coming from. I believe the physical world, I believe we are individual and we are unified. I believe the physical world is a representation, specifically of the individuality, but it also shows us how we're connected to the whole. I believe we live in a juxtaposition, a place of two very specific powers and forces, one that creates and joins and brings together, and one that pulls apart, tears down in order for us to constantly reconstruct and reevaluate. I believe the one that pulls apart and deconstructs is the physical world. And I believe the one that pulls together and kind of holds the lessons of what we learned from the deconstruction and reconstruction into what I guess people call the Akashic records, or on a less mystical sounding term is our subconscious. I believe we have individual subconsciouses, and I believe we have a collective subconscious. I believe we are one drop in a huge ocean, one small puzzle piece in a much larger puzzle. I believe that we are a spark of the great source or divine. Now, the two statements that I've heard recently, or concepts, is I did not ask to be born. Life is hard. I want to go home. Now, ironically enough, I've never really, that I remember, ever said I didn't ask to be born. But I do remember many times in my lifetime saying life is hard, I want to go home. I've only been suicidal once truly, a second time for a couple seconds. So I don't know if I really truly call that suicidal in my life. Most of the time I will also hear people say, and this is the one that I mean a lot of times in my life, I'm not suicidal, but man, I just wish I could rest. That's really what people are saying when they say, I want to go home. There's something called resonant frequency in physics. It is the rate at which something can like vibrate or take impact or something before it finally breaks down and shatters. And I believe that humans also have a resonant frequency. There's only so much we can take before we shatter. Now, I've also heard this statement, and it has bugged me before, that, I still love the song. Like Lady Gaga kind of touches on it. Baby, you were born this way. That God makes no mistakes. Okay? Now, I believe that we are a drop in the pond, a little puzzle piece. Even when I was like in high school, I kind of saw the cycle of life as being like the evaporation process. We are part of the ocean, a little drop in it. We're pulled up from it as individual drop, brought somewhere. Another way to look at it might be a seed on a tree, if you will, or a leaf on a tree. The leaf, the seed, eventually drops back to the ground. I think this is a more appropriate description. The ground then reabsorbs the leaf and the seed into the darkness. And I like the seed idea better. Well, you could do it either way, seed or leaf. The leaf eventually breaks down, becomes dirt, and then the tree pulls the individual essence of what eventually was that seed that now is combined with the dirt back up through its root system and up through the trunk, pushes it back out through the branches. The branches then, in the spring, push out and become the new leaf. Okay, same with like the evaporation process. The drop is pulled out of the ocean. It's brought up to the clouds. Gets a little stormy up there. They get a little agitated. And eventually the rain causes it to fall back to the ground and be reabsorbed into the total water system once more. Now, the difference between that analogy and my belief is I believe that the little tiny drop has the same characteristics as the ocean or the tree. So what I mean by that is the tiny drop can also create. Now, to me, the whole ocean is more the perfect creator, and the little drop is like the little kid placed in school. Okay? Whether it's math or reading or art or gym or fill in the blank, social studies, science, it gets placed into the classroom of life. And the first time it starts trying to read, trying to do math, trying to create art, trying to walk, all these things, it's not pretty. And it's filled with imperfection. But like an artist working with clay, they keep trying to shape, work at, make that thing hopefully a little bit better. And it depends on the kind of creator they are. If they're the kind of creator that keeps going and never gives up until their creation is as good as it can be, or if it's the kind of creator that looks at its creation, says, ugh, that's a mess, and then puts it in the corner. And then, of course, we have every type of creator in between. I also believe there's a mind-body connection. Now, people are going to probably find my view of this very controversial, and they're going to probably find it very insulting, because what it means is that we have to take 100% responsibility and care for the creations we make. I have often found that, if people have children who have disabilities, I believe there's a mind-body connection. And they're also kind of starting to find this a little bit more scientifically as well. It's interesting, like if you look at the disability of the child and you analyze where the parent was during that time, and you look at like the charts that the ancients have, or the moderns have created, it like almost perfectly lines up with what the children's disability was. And so to say that God makes no mistakes, on one hand, if you're talking about the eternal source, that could probably be true. But if you're talking about the little drops of God that get pulled out into this physical experience, I would say that's not true. I believe that we are down here to learn how to be like our Creator. And if we're learning, we're going to make mistakes. Okay? And those mistakes can be really hard to live with sometimes. Now, again, I believe we live in a world of juxtaposition. So while our outside bodies might be imperfect to human standards, we also have these internal worlds. And again, the way that I believe requires the highest form of taking responsibility for my own life that can be. Because I do believe that every one of us was given access, like an umbilical cord or something, to the great source. Like, we're not just left here to be this possibly imperfect or fragmented piece of source without a little divine help. Okay? But what I found, and what the ancients have found, and this is described through Jacob's ladder, the chakra system, the Native Americans, it's not the pet rainbow bridge, it's just called the rainbow bridge in Anishinaabe terms. You can find it across cultures, even in Norse cultures. There almost seems to be like 7 valves, chakras, energy systems that you have to turn on in order to get the full flow. Okay? That's why sometimes people feel alone, because either they don't know about these valves, or they just don't wanna, and that's okay too. I've actually had some women in my life, 2 totally different women. One was Filipina and one I think was of Indian descent. They say I used to ask God to use me, but that became pretty hard. And so I basically told God to turn off the valve. And they would hear, what they would need to do or, whatever, but they became tired. And so this is a free will planet, place. And so, per their request, the valve was turned off. Now, whether the valve is turned on or off doesn't necessarily matter, okay? I'm not saying everybody needs to be connected to Source. Everyone needs to have all their chakras open and flowing. No. Some people can have all these valves off, be fully in the physical world, and be happy. There isn't much dissatisfaction for them. And then I go back to my 3 questions, If living in the physical world makes you happy, functional, and gives you energy, and again, this might be controversial, because I've also heard people say, I should go to church. Well, are you happy? Are you functional? Do you have energy over time? Then you're good. You don't need to. If you want to, go for it. But sometimes I find that religious organizations can pull people off track sometimes. Again, no matter what it is for you, as long as it makes you happy, functional, and gives you energy over time, keep doing it. If it doesn't, question it further. Do I need a tune-up, an overhaul, a trade-in, or a timeout to evaluate what I should do? Okay? So, I was never asked to be born. Some aspects, that's true. You're the person who created you. Either asked or just stumbled upon you being born. Maybe they didn't even ask themselves. And then the second one, which is, I'm tired, life is hard, good morning, and I want to go home. That's your resonant frequency. That's I'm experiencing so much pain and discomfort, I need relief. And what I found when I kept saying that is, this is the tricky part. Relief will always come, but you have to open the door. There are times in my life where I've seen somebody be surrounded with everything they could need or want to heal themselves. It's like they're drowning in the ocean. There's life rafts, there's rowboats, there's whatever around them. They're like, I'm not getting in. I don't trust that life raft. I don't know what's in that rowboat. And so they almost continue to keep themselves drowning, even though help is all around them. The other things that you can do is learn to walk through those and unlock those gates. Walk through fear into courage, guilt into acceptance, insecurity into self-confidence, anger and jealousy into joy, your lies into truth, your misperception into clear perception. A huge misperception that I see from people, and either it was impounded and ingrained into their head through parents or religion or whatever, and I just think it is the most weird thing, is I deserve to be in pain. I deserve to suffer. To suffer is to be a glory to God or something. I don't know. I'm like, what God in heaven would ever, you know what, even forget heaven. What parent on earth would ever willingly want to see their child suffer? That's not a God or a parent I'd want to be a child of. Again, is that God? Is that teaching? Making you more or less functional? Giving you more or less energy over time? You know? Do you need to take a time out and reevaluate this parent that you're following? Do you need a tune-up, an overhaul, or a trade-in? I do find that the original source is like a parent, and some people can have an issue with that because maybe they had more of the parent or the creator who was like, man, I made a mess of this, and then just put the creation in a corner. And then even worse, I've heard some of my older friends and things say not only did it create it and put it in the corner and kind of forget about it, but every once in a while it would walk by and say, oh my God, you're such an ugly abomination or whatever. So that's why people don't really like the idea of God or source being like a parent. But I see it as like a divine parent, not a human parent. Okay? Like in your imagination, it is the parent you wish you would have had if your parent was the one who left you in a corner and forgot about you. Again, I talk about plugging in the opposite. And I remember hearing this concept many years ago, actually. It's like, wait, I can use my imagination to heal my mind and my emotions? You know, a lot of times people say grow up. That's a whole nother topic for another day. The difference between keeping a childlike heart and in some aspects not growing up and then not growing up totally. Again, another topic for another day. But that's what children do. They use their imagination, number one, to run through several different scenarios before they get to the real one. It's like a video game. I'm running down, I'm trying different moves. Oh, that's not going to work. I'm not going to get hurt. I can respawn in my imagination or in the video game, but I can't do that in real life, right? In real life, if you mess up, you're dead. So, children use their imagination. They also use their imagination to, like, they don't even know that life is boring or dull. They use imagination to entertain themselves. And so we can take this gift, this lesson from children, that if we didn't like our imperfect creator, maybe our creators, and some of you had wonderful parents, and that's awesome. I'm talking really specifically to the people who maybe didn't have the best experience. Okay? You can use your imagination to heal you. But for some reason, I have many people in my life who just can't let go of the hot coal. They just keep hanging on to it rather than dropping it and picking up more positive habits of mindfulness, meditation, visualization, and other positive habits that could really heal them. For some reason, I wrote a poem this morning for my writers group, not because of me, but because I keep seeing this theme through so many people. People keep themselves on these isolated islands of loneliness and despair. Yes, the world's hurt them, but guess what? You know, it's hurt a lot of people. And it's a choice. And if people want to stay on their, Simon and Garfunkel, I'm a rock, I'm an island. That is their choice. But so many people self-imprison themselves in, well, these self-made prisons. There's no concrete walls. There's no locks. There's simply these places they withdraw into. And oh, believe me, I've done that. Probably for almost my whole life. So I'm not judging anyone. You gotta do what you gotta do in the moments you're given to feel protected and safe. So I get it. But at some point you have to start trusting that the world around you might not be as big and scary as you've perceived it to be. Now, if you are in, let's say, Southside Chicago, and the murder rates are cracking up, all the time, fine. You have a legitimate reason to be scared. I get it. Okay? But if you're in a part of the world where there really isn't a lot of physical threats, and there could be mental and emotional threats, then you need to start being brave if you want to break out of your self-imposed prison. Okay? You may not have been asked to be here, but I really love the analogy. I'm going to have to go back and look at his name and put his link in here below. That we were given an opportunity, a spark of this life. Out of billions of sperms, you were the one that won. So at some point, whether you remember it or not, you did want to be here. Because you hightailed it your way to that big old orb egg. And now here you are. And what I really loved about this visualization, and I'm not going to go too much into it because that was another YouTube video that I did, which hopefully I'll put the link below. The spark of life, you were given it. Not just by the Creator, but by your ancestors. And so you're given a choice of what to do with it. And maybe your purpose or passion is to take, maybe your Creator gave you an ember that was almost dying. You can choose to let that spark of life die. Or maybe you can say, maybe I can at least fan it into a soft glowing candle flame in the corner. Maybe, whatever. I just really like that analogy, that you were given the spark of life to carry it forward. And it is your choice what you want to do with it. If you want to keep it to yourself on an island as like this really dull coal that doesn't bring you a whole lot of life, or that you hang on to that actually hurts you, or you can choose to let it go. You can choose to fan it, make it just a little bit bigger. It doesn't have to be a whole blazing bonfire. I mean, if you want to, that's cool too. And who knows? Maybe you choose to stay alone on your self-imprisoned island, but you start developing your own self-confidence to the point where you've developed your spark into a blazing bonfire, and now a helicopter or a boat off seas sees it and is attracted to you and starts connecting to you. Or maybe you're on this island and somebody else has done that, and you go, wow, that fire over there, that looks kind of warm and inviting. And maybe that's just enough hope and light to give you courage to step off of your own island and head toward that light. Okay? So, I believe that we live in the juxtaposition. There's the physical world and the metaphysical world. You know, some people say I didn't ask to be here. I would probably argue, whether you remembered it or not, which you probably didn't. You probably did on one hand. You just don't remember. You had a spark at one point. And when you came forth, you either found that you had these great parents, awful parents, and of course the spectrum of everything in between. We are, I work with junior high students. I call them adults in progress. I got that from a friend of mine. We call them AIPs. Okay, well, you're creators in progress. You're CIPs. Your parents were CIPs. And so you could either spend your time and energy, focusing on that and blaming them, or you could forgive them for being creators in progress, humans who make mistakes. Because guess what? We're not perfect either. And you could thank them for the lessons. Because whether they were great parents and role models for you and taught you who you want to be just like them when you grow up, or whether they taught you, that's not what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be the opposite. They taught you. So you can thank them for the lessons. And then at some point, you have to take your own responsibility into your hands to start to be your own CIP, creator in progress. So many times people hang on to that wounded inner child in them that they never see their own divine potential within themselves. I also believe our brain is a physical representation of our consciousness. I believe in what I call the unfolding, the unwinding, the spiraling, the evolving. And if you look at the brain, it spirals. At the very middle is the amygdala, or the animal brain. And it spirals out, back, and around to the prefrontal cortex, the more human brain, the more rational brain, the one that thinks and problem solves, the one that empathizes, the one that can form connections. And so, just looking at human nature, you can almost see where they are in the unfolding process, just through their own social skills. And we can literally see it scientifically through brain scans. It's an amazing world that we live in now. So, whether you're in it now, or whether you have experienced it before, I didn't ask to be born. Life's tough, I want to go home. It's always a choice. You're here. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to spend your time and energy in hell, in a hellish state of mind, just focusing on that? Or are you going to turn the ship around and say, okay, I might not have been dealt the best hand, but I'm not a tree. I don't have to stay planted in toxic places. I am a human. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I'm a CIP. I'm a creator in progress. I can constantly use my environment around me and my feelings to ask questions. How does this experience make me feel in the moment and over time? Does it give me more or less energy in the moment or over time? And does it make me more or less functional in the moment or over time? Does it need a tune-up, an overhaul, or a trade-in? And you are a ship. You can steer your course. Sometimes that means putting on blinders and noise-canceling earphones, because misery loves company. And it will tell you, no, you need to stay in places that hurt and imprison you. At some point, you got to wake up and you got to go, oh, hell no, I don't. Because if I stay there, there's not going to be a me. Okay? So, you can ask those questions for yourself and start navigating life. If you ever feel like I don't want to be here, life's too tough, I want to go home, you can say that. You know, every time I've said I want to go home, I swear to God, a life preserver comes. It might not be what I'm thinking, so I have to be open-minded and I have to be able to see, but something always comes. A person, a podcast, a resource, okay? Anyway, I just wanted to kind of talk about that because it popped up in my reality. I like to share my thoughts for a couple reasons. Number one, I find if it pops up a lot, maybe it should be an issue to be addressed. Number two, and I know this sounds weird, but it's also a spiritual practice, which is facing your mortality. And as I sit down, and I'm far from, I hope, my mortal days. I hope I'm going to be here for quite a while. But that's the beauty of social media. I leave these words of wisdom because, you know, a 12-year-old or whatever, 21-year-old, they might not care about it now. But when they become 20, 30, 40, and they have these experiences, whether I'm physically here or not, they're always going to have their mom. And this was funny. The other day, you know, I thought about it as more like an insult. You know, I was talking with my 12-year-old. How are you going to adult without a mom? And he said, YouTube can be my mom. And I know in that moment, he and I were thinking, if you need to learn anything, you just YouTube it, right? Well, now literally, whether I'm physically here or not, YouTube can literally be his mom. And I also share this, not just for my children, but because I have heard from other people that the way that I think, the way that I see, the way that I experience things has helped them. And I also share this because people who have radically different ways of seeing the world and interacting with the world and thinking with the world have helped me not feel alone. So whether no one listens to this today, but my sons find it 20 or 30 years from now, whether on average about 3 to 7 people listen to my messages, at least I've helped someone. Maybe provide, and actually that was another friend of mine's quote this morning, hope is my power and strength. So hopefully I provided just a drop more hope for someone to see the world maybe a little bit differently. That might help them unlock one of the doors to their self-made prisons. I hope you can use your own wisdom, your own words of advice that you can give as keys to others that might help them unlock doors to their own prisons and see the world in a new way so they can experience more freedom. Because now more than ever, in this world of masks and pandemics and, you know, whatever else, we need to experience a little bit more freedom and a little bit more peace. Peace and blessings.